Hey guys, this is MTG Degree. My name is Luke, and today we have an exciting video. It is the Magic Origins pre-release primer. Now before we go over the cards, I have a very quick disclaimer, which is that we are only going over commons and uncommons, because the majority of what you open will be commons and uncommons. Okay, well let's start the set review off with the lands. The Pain lands are back for this set, and they indicate that basically you don't want to be running 4 or 5 colors. I would suggest running 2, with maybe a third color to splash for a very important card. There are 3 colorless utility lands in the set as well. Of them, I like Rogue Passage the best, and Network the least, but all 3 of them are playable. Next, let's look at the artifacts. There are 2 that come off as somewhat serviceable to me. The first one is Runed Servitor. As a 2/2 for 2, this is just fine. The second one is Gold Forged Sentinel. As a 4/4 flyer for 6, it's reasonably costed, and although it's not particularly exciting, it is an extremely large body in the air for this set. There are 10 multicolored cards in this set, 1 for each color pair. Of them, I found 6 to be quite playable. The first is Iroas's Champion, then Thunderclap Wyvern, Blood-Cursed Knight, especially with some enchantments, Citadel Castellan, Zendikar Incarnate, and Shaman of the Pack. The important thing that I would note about these gold cards is that while they are playable, none of them are strong enough to make me want to splash for them, so I wouldn't add another color just to play one of these. Next, let's go over white creatures. The first one I'd like to go over is Topan Freeblade. As a 2/2 for 2, this normally wouldn't be very exciting. However, the addition of Renown 1 punishes slow starts by the opponent, and Vigilance is an added bonus. The next white creature is Consul's Lieutenant. As a 2/1 for 2 with First Strike, it would already be annoying and playable. However, with Renown 1, it punishes your opponent for blocking, and it punishes your opponent for not blocking. A real lose-lose situation for your opponents. The next white creature is Knight of the Pilgrim's Road. A 3/2 for 3 with Renown 1? I'm in. The next white creature is Blessed Spirits, a 2/2 flyer for 3. Evasion is always important in Limited, and if you have one of the few good enchantments in the set, then this just has pure upside. Our next white creature is an Angel, Patron of the Valiant. As a 4/4 flyer for 5, it is already something I would play. The +1/+1 counter text basically couldn't be there and I'd already be on board. If you get the extra bonus out of it, that's great, but it does not need to be there to be playable. As a curve topper, we have Sentinel of the Eternal Watch, a 4/6 Vigilance creature for 6. The real seller for this creature, though, is its ability. As long as this creature is in play, your opponent won't be attacking you with their best creature. And their other creatures are not likely to get through. Okay, let's move on to white non-creature spells. The first one I'd like to mention is Murder Investigation. Normally, I'm kind of scared of these aura cards because if somebody kills your creature in response, then you get nothing. However, the removal in this set is not that good, so I think you'll get this thing to stick more often than not. Additionally, it plays really well with renowned creatures, giving them a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situation when they're blocking. We all know that removal is king in Limited, and Celestial Flare and Swift Reckoning are just the answers we need. However, be prepared to remove that Celestial Flare if your opponent has a bunch of tokens or anything. White also got the benefit of some unconditional removal and suppression bonds. If you find one, play it. Alright, let's see what blue has to offer. The first card is Watercourser. I like this because it's an early drop that will trade off, and if you play it late game, it will trade with higher drops since it has a pumping ability. The next card is Scrapskin Drake. Have I ever said that flying is good in Limited? And speaking of evasion, Whirler Rogue. This card is ridiculous. 4 toughness and 4 power for 4 in blue. Pretty good. 2 of that power and toughness is in the air. And the card comes with a mana-less ability to give your creatures evasion? This is a must play if you're in blue. Our next card is Separatist Void Mage, a 2/2 for 4 that bounces a creature when it comes into play. Getting tempo on your opponent is always nice, and this card will let you do that. Our next card is Towergeist, a 2/2 flyer for 4. When it comes into play, you get to filter through your deck and draw a card. This is reminding me a lot of Muldrifter, and that is a good card. Now this isn't Muldrifter, but it certainly is playable. Our next card is Scab Goliath. As a 6/9 for 6, this thing is huge in blue. And it comes with the ability Trample? What is this, a green creature? Anyway, if your blue deck is looking a little thin on the toughness, this guy will certainly get you there. It's worth noting that you can't cast this if you don't have 2 creatures in your graveyard. However, if you get to 6 mana and your opponent hasn't even killed 2 of your creatures, you're probably winning anyway, so don't even worry about it. Alright, so next let's talk blue non-creature spells. The first one is Turn to Frog. For 1 and a blue, you get to turn their creature into a 1/1 without any abilities until end of turn. This effect is great for turning their giant scary monster into a 1/1 that you can just block like it's nothing. The next card is Claustrophobia. Have I ever mentioned that I like removal? Our next card is Disperse. For 1 and a blue, you get an unsummon effect. This is great for gaining tempo on your opponent, changing combat math. It's extremely versatile. If you're generally not a fan of unsummon effects, give this one a try. It's very efficient. Our last blue non-creature spell is Stratus Walk, a card that I am a huge fan of. For 1 and a blue, it replaces itself by drawing you a card. It gives your creature flying. And it's worthy to note that you can enchant your opponent's creatures with this. If you do, because you want to get in on the ground, their creature will no longer be able to block, so it's extremely versatile as well. This is the kind of annoying blue spell that warms my heart. Alright, on to black creatures, and the first one is Fleshbag Marauder. This kind of sacrifice thing is the thing that I always want in my black decks. Unfortunately, if your opponent has a bunch of Thopters flying around, it's going to lose value quite quickly, so be ready to board it out. Our next black creature is Eyeblight Assassin. Weren't we just talking about Thopters? Our next black creature is completely obnoxious, and that creature is Deadbridge Shaman. As a 3/1 for 3, it's fairly costed, and when it dies, your opponent discards a card? Ugh, this thing is gross to play against. This creature is annoying to attack into, it's annoying to block. This is the kind of thing that really gets a groan out of your opponents. Our next black creature is Nantuko Husk. This gets better as you have more token producers, but even on its own is pretty decent. It makes combat math really annoying for your opponents, and whenever you use it, remember that you can block first, and then sacrifice creatures, so that those things that were blocked by the creatures that were sacrificed still do no damage to you. Our last black creature is Revenant, a big, huge, annoying flyy thing. Now I won't lie to you guys, black creatures were a little unexciting. However, the black non-creatures are quite good. As usual, black has a bunch of good removal. The first one is Reeve Soul, followed by Weight of the Underworld, Unholy Hunger, and Cruel Revival. In addition, we're seeing a return of Read the Bones. This card is a fantastic draw spell, and I always love having one good draw spell in each of my decks. This one certainly fits right in. Our next card is Dark Dabbling, and it does its best work as a combat trick. As with all combat tricks, it can be turned off with removal, but the removal is not that fantastic. The best part about this card is that it replaces itself, which always raises a card's estimation in my book. But if you have Spell Mastery, the card can be absurd. If your opponent attacks into you, and you have Spell Mastery on this card, they are going to lose a lot of creatures, and you probably won't lose any. You know how many of this card I'm going to run? As many as I can. Okay, on to red. So let's start with Bogart Brute. As a 3/2 for 3, he's pretty okay, but with Menace, he's got a very annoying pseudo-evasion ability going on that allows him to punch in some extra damage. Ghirapur Gearcrafter is in a similar boat. You get a 2/1 for 3, but you also get a 1/1 Thopter. A creature on the ground with a bonus annoying creature in the air is pretty much where I want to be. A Crowan Sergeant is our next red creature, and it has that annoying combo of First Strike and Renown. Whether your opponent is blocking or not blocking, it's kind of annoying either way. Our next card is a little bit ridiculous. Acolyte of the Inferno is a 3/1 for 3, but when it becomes blocked by a creature, it deals 2 damage to it. This is kind of like First Strike. It's worth noting that this can only be profitably blocked by a creature with 6 toughness or more. This creature strikes me as just a tiny bit bonkers. Our next card is Pricklebore, which is a fantastic aggressive creature. For 5 mana, it's a 3/3, but when it's your turn, it has +2/+0 and First Strike. Nobody likes dealing with 5 damage First Strikers. Our last red creature is Seismic Elemental, and I can also imagine this being the last creature cast in a game. With the built-in ability to stop your opponent from blocking for a turn, attached to a solid 4/4 body, this creature is kind of what you want to be doing. For non-creature spells in red, we've got Fiery Impulse, Lightning Javelin, and Ravaging Blaze. All 3 of these are quality burn spells that you're going to want in your red deck. The last non-creature spell I'd like to mention is Magmatic Insight. Aggressively costed at 1 mana, this card will turn a land you don't need into 2 cards that you do. Last, but certainly not least, we have green. The first creature is Elvish Visionary. A 1/1 for 2, and when it comes into play, you draw a card. It's nice to have late game because you get to cycle it and draw a card and leave maybe a chump blocker behind. And early game, you get a body on the board and you accelerate your rate of draw. Our next green creature is Leaf Gilder. I like this card because it mana ramps well if you need it to, and it also tangles on the board early on with its 2 power quite well. Our next 2-drop is Undercity Troll, a card that I could not be more excited to play if I'm playing green. It's a 2/2 for 2 with Renown 1, so it punishes your opponents for being slow. However, in the late game, it also has Regenerate. Regenerating blockers are always annoying for your opponent, especially when they have 2 or even 3 power. Orchard Spirit is our next green creature, and it's a bit unusual. It's a 2/2 for 3 in green, and it doesn't exactly have flying, but it doesn't exactly have unblockable either. It's just hard to interact with. Evasion creatures in green are fairly unusual, so I'm happy to have this. Our next card is Somberwald Alpha, a 3/2 for 4. However, when it attacks, it gives all of your attacking creatures a nice Anthem effect, and it can give your big dumb green creatures trample, which is exactly what big dumb green creatures want. And speaking of big dumb green creatures, Skysnare Spider. This card is extremely annoying. As a 6/6 for 6, it's pretty huge. And it's also got Vigilance, so it attacks and blocks with impunity, and it has Reach. So if you're having problems in the air, you don't anymore. There are 2 non-creature spells in green which interest me. The first one is Wild Instincts. I always like removal, and having your big green creature punch another creature will probably remove it. Additionally, I like that it gives the +2/+2 until end of turn, which allows you to also crack in for more damage if you decide to attack with that creature. The next non-creature spell in green is Joraga Invocation. This card is actually absurd. Once you get to 6 mana, you get to cast this thing, and man is it worth it. All of your creatures get +3/+3. So you get to attack for a lot of damage in green, which is kind of what I'm trying to do in the first place. But beyond that, each of your creatures must be blocked if able. This is incredible because if your opponent is even similar to you in creatures, suddenly all of yours got a lot bigger and all of their creatures have to one-on-one them. Let me tell you right now, their creatures are not going to be happy at the end of that. Well, that closes out our set review for today, but before you go, I'd like to point you to this video, which is about common mistakes in sealed deck construction, which is what we're going to be doing at the pre-release. Additionally, if you found the content today useful, we're always making more of it for you guys, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button to make sure you're getting all of it. Let me know in the comments what cards you guys are most excited to play. This has been MTG Degree. My name is Luke, and I'll see you guys next video.